April 1943. A twin-engine Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber knifes along the green roof of Bougainville, its aluminum skin flashing in tropical sun and cloud shadow. Inside, amid the drone of twin Mitsubishi Kase engines and the smell of hot oil and canvas, sits Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, gambler, strategist, the architect of Pearl Harbor, en route to visit forward bases and stiffen a fraying line. The air seems calm, the schedule exact, yet the precision he prizes has already betrayed him. 2 years earlier he warned Tokyo that Japan could run wild for 6 months, but could promise nothing after. Speed and surprise might sting an industrial giant, but only for a time. That warning, carried like a quiet metronome beneath the victories, frames everything that follows as 1943 grinds into attrition. Guadalcanal lost in February, supply convoys shredded by submarines, veteran pilots thinned by exhaustion and loss, the Americans reading more of Japan's radio traffic with each passing month. The inspection tour, Rabaul to Balala, Balale to Buin, offers photographs and handshakes but also timing points, legs measured in minutes, altitude bands, escort assignments. Somewhere far away in rooms full of paper and wire, men who never see the jungle track those points against a map. The Admiral watches the jungle slide by. In the fuselage aisle, crewmen check the navigational drift meter, touch the bulkhead, lean toward the cockpit. Ahead, a thin overcast smears the horizon. Below, a scatter of sago palms and creeks. He cannot know that a chain of choices, signal formats, staff habits, a culture of punctuality has made him visible. He cannot hear, over the Kase's hum, the contrailless approach of aircraft already slicing toward the rendezvous line at wave-top height. What began as morale theater now carries a heavier weight, proof that intelligence, once marginal, has become a weapon with operational reach. By the time the Betty crosses Bougainville's coast again, the pattern of the Pacific is set. Decisions are measured not only in shells and sorties but in passwords, call signs, and the mistakes of men who assume the enemy does not know the clock they keep. The Admiral's pencil notes, range figures, visit timings, last-minute questions, capture a mind still seeking advantage. Outside, sunlight flickers across the wing. Inside, the future tightens its circle. And in the same sky, precisely where his staff planned he would be, the hunters are already there, running the numbers down to seconds as the islands unspool beneath them. At 07:30 on 18th April 1943, 18 Lockheed P-38. Lightning fighters lift from Henderson Field, Guadalcanal, their Allison engines clawing hot air, each aircraft heavy with fuel and drop tanks for a 400-plus mile leg. The formation is a javelin built from math. Climb to a set gate, descend to wave-top altitude to avoid search sets, hold headings and speeds long enough to intersect a moving point in the sky. The target is not a runway or convoy, but a person. U.S. Navy codebreakers working from traffic designated JN-25, the main operational code of the Imperial Japanese Navy, have decrypted a message that lays out Admiral Yamamoto's inspection itinerary down to takeoff and arrival times. Station HYPO in Hawaii assembles the fragments. A staff on Guadalcanal converts those fragments into headings, fuel reserves, and time on target. Major John Mitchell commands a formation split into a high cover and a killer element. The sea below is slate. The pilots fly without radios chattering, watching the sweep secondhand, nursing power to make the line. At 09:34 near the approaches to Kahili, the plan and the world meet. 2 Betty bombers ahead with 6 A6M Zeros above, their formation stretched by routine and terrain. The 1st American section pulls the Zeros away. The interceptors in the killer element push throttles through the stops and climb into firing position. Cannon and .50 caliber slugs rake aluminum. The lead Betty coughs black smoke. An engine seizes. The bomber descends into jungle with the flattening geometry of inevitability. A second bomber staggers, holes stitched along the wing. A Zero dives, trailing a thin scribble of fire. The sky breaks into separate duels, each measured in seconds. There is no speech here, no bravado, only geometry and gravity. In less than 5 minutes, the man whose signature set ships against Oahu is gone, killed not by chance encounter, but by a deliberate fusion of signals intelligence, range planning, and pilots who hit their mark. On Guadalcanal, the runway receives them back in a hail of dust and heat. Claims and counterclaims about who fired the fatal burst will linger for years. At the edge of the island, the sea keeps its own counsel. The more important fact, immediate and cold, is that a line has been crossed. Decrypted traffic has guided fighter guns onto a single human being, turning the abstraction of code-breaking into the concrete removal of a commander. In Tokyo and at Forward Fleet Headquarters, the first reports move by circuit and phrases so clipped they feel like denial. The silence that spreads in their wake is not emptiness. It is calculation, and the first measure of what a strategic mind's absence will cost. By late afternoon, search parties moving under a canopy of pandanus and palm, find torn aluminum and the scorched ellipse where fire ran along leaf and duff. The bomber's fuselage lies broken in the understory. A wing points like a compass needle toward the coast. Recovery crews work quietly, documenting lifting, binding. In one account, the Admiral sits as if still braced for impact, sword at his side, cap nearby, a tableau that propaganda will later translate into stoic myth. The radio link to Rabaul carries the first confirmed phrases: crash located, remains recovered, and soon after, staff officers begin to weigh not ceremony, but risk. Morale at the front has thinned. The air groups are tired. The convoy routes bleed ships at night. The Navy Ministry in Tokyo must decide whether to announce a loss that will become a lens for every other loss. In a ministry room where tobacco smoke clouds ceiling moldings, senior admirals review the reports. Nobody rushes to words. For a decade, Yamamoto bridged factions. An officer who understood American industry from time spent in the United States, who argued against war yet executed it with precision once ordered, who voted for modernization, carrier aviation, gunnery practice, fuel stockpiles, hard arithmetic that politics disfavored. That amalgam, dissent in private, obedience in public, gave the Navy a conscience and a governor. With it removed, bureaucratic gravity pulls outward. The decision is containment. Messages to fleets will report that the commander died in battle. Public channels will remain vague. The apparatus will stage routine bulletins to imply he still inspects, still confers, still moves. This affords time to shape narrative and plan succession. Yet news moves sideways as well as down. Among staff clerks, mess crews, pilots, gunners, word travels by inference, the sudden tightness of a chief of staff's face. A wreath on a table, a line of cars arriving after midnight. Beneath discipline, fear makes its own channel. If the enemy knew the route and the minute, then what else do they know? That question touches more than caution. It touches culture. Precision has been a virtue. Trains arriving to the minute, ceremonies to the second, orders as timetables, time as control. Now precision looks like a trail of breadcrumbs. In the offices where ciphers are drafted and distribution lists set, some officers argue to change systems immediately. Others defend the familiarity of forms under pressure. The jungle wind moves the canopy as if the island were breathing. A report goes forward with a stamp. A month of concealment begins. The fleet holds its posture on paper, and inside the seams the first small surrenders to doubt map the future better than any communique. Every piece of history we uncover brings the past a little closer. If you'd like to keep exploring these hidden moments with us, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Your support keeps these stories alive. In the Bougainville jungle, American reconnaissance detachments and local scouts move first across the crash site's margins, photographing serial plates and structural details to confirm the intercept's success. The wreckage yields enough airframe sections, burned equipment to fix identity. The intelligence loop that began at cipher desks completes itself in leaf mold and fragments. On Guadalcanal, the returning P-38s taxi and beneath heat shimmers, canopies sliding back to exhale fuel and sweat. Ground crews swarm. Armorers unship empty belts. Maintenance chiefs count holes and debrief pilots. Only one American aircraft is lost. Fuel margins run tighter than planned but hold. For headquarters, the operational ledger reads clean. Objective met, force recovered, message sent. The United States will not trumpet how. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Pacific Command staffs hold the story close, understanding that the value of code breaking lies not in the boast, but in the next invisible intercept. When release does come, it frames the event as patrol and chance encounter, an economy of truth that preserves advantage. The larger proof stands without press. Signals intelligence can locate and shape tactical events with near-surgical precision when matched to aircraft with range, speed, and pilots disciplined enough to fly a clock to the second. This is not the first time cryptanalysis bent the Pacific's arc. The Midway victory in June 1942 leaned heavily on reading operational intent from the same JN-25 family, a fact that remains compartmented and jealously guarded, but it is the first time the arrow is aimed at a single human name. The impact is psychological as much as material. In Tokyo, carefully worded bulletins thread the line between honor and omission. Within staff corridors, contingency papers multiply. Who succeeds to command, what changes in deployment follow, where to risk strength without the Admiral's instinct for timing. That instinct, part mathematics, part feel for adversary habits, had given the fleet coherence amid scarcity. In its absence, doctrine must suffice, yet doctrine does not speak when circumstances deviate. Meanwhile, the Americans continue to expand their own machine. More carriers under construction, more pilots in training, logistics nodes modernized, runways lengthening on island after island. The intercept thus resonates beyond Bougainville's trees. It demonstrates that reach is now a compound of factories, training syllabi, airfields, radios, and rooms where traffic analysts turn chatter into bearings. When the news finally reaches the public, much later and in softened form, it will be absorbed as another step in a war of steps. For the officers holding the real story, it reads as a diagram of what the remaining months will demand. Coordination across specialties, patience, and a willingness to let quiet advantages work. In the Pacific, that quiet is now decisive. The Admiral's absence forces his surviving peers to ask not what he would say, but what a system without him can do. The answer will arrive in increments. Operational choices made under pressure, pilots trained too quickly, convoys risked too far, and an enemy that no longer needs to catch up. On 21st May 1943, Tokyo turns gray beneath heavy banners. Black flags drape the Imperial Palace gates, and along the broad lanes to Hibiya Park, sailors and civilians stand shoulder to shoulder in silence. Beneath the facade of ritual precision lies orchestration, music scored in minor keys. The cadence of drums slowed to half-tempo, every camera angle rehearsed. Yamamoto's urn wrapped in white silk moves through the crowd in a procession framed as imperial sacrifice. The state funeral is both grief and message, a tableau assuring the public that the empire remains unbroken, that loyalty to the emperor endures beyond mortality. Official communiqué described death in battle over the South Pacific. There is no mention of signals intelligence, of an itinerary transmitted too openly, of fighters that followed math to a single point on a map. To the populace, the Admiral's passing is a noble loss in the cycle of duty. To the Navy Ministry, it is damage control. In offices overlooking the ceremony, officers who knew the actual route of the intercept read internal cables and avoid each other's eyes. The blame can be distributed: communications staff for using a compromised code, the general staff for demanding publicity tours, luck for being absent when needed. But distribution changes nothing. Diaries later uncovered describe the mood as disbelief shading into fatalism. It is as if the gods have withdrawn their favor. One entry reads, the ink pressed deep. For a navy built on precision and hierarchy, the irony is unbearable. The system that demanded obedience destroyed the one man capable of questioning it. That paradox becomes quiet contagion. In mess halls, pilots toast the Admiral's memory but fly knowing that radios may betray them. Engineers tighten censorship on signal forms, yet dependence on those signals grows. What was once faith in method becomes superstition about exposure. Outside, newspapers print stirring editorials, words crafted by information bureaus to sustain morale. Yamamoto as warrior scholar, Yamamoto as embodiment of Bushido. The public weeps. The officers calculate. For the Empire, mourning serves a dual function: ritual closure and strategic anesthesia. As incense drifts upward through the park, the smoke veils a deeper truth already felt by those within the ministry. The loss is not symbolic, but structural. A balance of intellect, daring, and caution is gone, and no replacement carries the same authority. Behind the black crepe and uniformed precision, the fleet has begun to drift, though few will admit it aloud. By summer 1943, the combined fleet continues to sail and fight, but the rhythm feels off, an orchestra without its conductor. Admiral Minichi Koga, appointed successor, inherits charts inked with losses and supply lines thinning to threads. He is competent, methodical, yet lacks Yamamoto's instinct for when to advance and when to yield. In Tokyo and truck, staff meetings stretch late into humid nights, paper maps damp with sweat and candle soot. Each front demands fuel, aircraft replacement crews, commodities Japan can no longer conjure. American submarines sever convoy routes through the Bismarck Sea. Allied bombers reach Rabaul regularly. The Empire's perimeter, once daringly extended, now contracts under pressure measured in tonnage and time. Inside this contraction, friction replaces unity. The Imperial Navy debates whether to hold the Solomons or fall back toward the Marianas. Younger officers advocate consolidation. Traditionalists demand another decisive battle in the Yamamoto mold, not realizing that the industrial ratios that made his warnings prophetic have worsened. Fuel reserves dip below operational minimums. Aircrews are rushed from abbreviated training to frontline squadrons. Every sortie consumes irreplaceable experience. Meanwhile, Allied codebreakers continue to read enough of JN-25's evolution to predict convoy movements and intercept communications about reinforcement timetables. What once seemed a single tragic exposure now reveals a structural vulnerability. The system itself cannot change fast enough. Koga attempts reforms. New routing, alternative ciphers, but bureaucratic inertia and technical lag blunt them. Within 6 months, another carrier, the Shokaku, lies wrecked beneath the Pacific, and hundreds of pilots vanish with it. Among officers who once dined with Yamamoto, conversation turns elegiac. They recall his insistence on aircraft carriers as Japan's spear, and his warnings about the United States manufacturing depth. Each news of loss replays those cautions. The combined fleet still issues orders, still fights, but energy has become imitation of energy. The central nervous system is gone. Signals move but no longer cohere. To enlisted men, the difference shows in smaller things: delays in orders, erratic supply convoys, contradictory directives. The Admiral's death is not only absence of leadership, it is the silence between pulses of a machine that once hummed in perfect sync. Across the Pacific, American task forces sense that silence and radar screens unchallenged and convoys unguarded. They fill the void with presence island by island. The Empire continues to fight outwardly, but inwardly its compass spins without bearing. A navy measuring not victory but time left. By mid-1944, Yamamoto's warning resolves into numbers impossible to ignore. For 6 months we can run wild, he had said. The calendar now stands 16 months beyond his death. American carriers sweep through the Philippine Sea, decks packed with Grumman Hellcats and Avengers, formations larger than entire Japanese air arms. The Battle of the Philippine Sea unfolds not as duel but as arithmetic. Hundreds of Japanese aircraft rise, undertrained and underfueled, into perfect American radar coverage. Anti-aircraft batteries and disciplined fighter screens turn the sky into a grid of tracers. Within hours, 600 Japanese planes fall. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, pilots later call it. In that loss lies the end of Japan's naval aviation, and with it the extinction of the doctrine Yamamoto perfected. The strategic irony runs deep. His emphasis on surprise strikes on preemption depended on seasoned crews and reconnaissance accuracy. Now Japan possesses neither. Factories bombed, fuel scarce, training reduced to weeks, the fleet becomes a fleet in name. Carriers float but carry few planes. The empire had once gambled on a decisive battle that would shatter American will. Instead, it meets an enemy that multiplies resources faster than Japan can replace a single wing. Numbers absorb courage. Within command circles, the realization settles with quiet despair. Dispatches from island garrisons read alike. Low ammunition, airfields cratered, morale brittle. Admiral Koga is dead, lost when his transport crashes in a storm. His successor, Toyota, inheriting not strategy, but salvage. Each defeat traces its lineage backward. Midway, Guadalcanal, Yamamoto's intercepted flight. The geometry of intelligence and industry has inverted the Pacific. Where once Japan calculated advantage from distance and timing, now distance works against it. Timing belongs to factories west of the Rockies. Surviving officers in wardrooms whisper that Yamamoto's loss was more than symbolic. It removed the last link between ambition and realism. Without him, no voice strong enough remained to challenge delusion. Even those who had disagreed with his caution now repeat his words as prophecy. Statistical graphs replacing maps and briefings tell the same story. Oil reserves in months, pilots in hundreds, ships in single digits. The empire continues the motions of command, but mathematics dictates outcome. The admiral who once balanced daring with restraint understood this logic instinctively. His successors face it as sentence. When the sun sets on the Philippine Sea, wreckage drifts in oily rainbows, and the lesson hangs unspoken over both sides. Wars of machines are decided long before the final battle begins. In the war's last months, as Japan's harbors choke with rusting hulls and cities burn under nightly bombardment, surviving admirals measure time not in victories, but in endurance. Many trace the unraveling back to April 1943, to the morning over Bougainville when precision became vulnerability. In diaries found after surrender, phrases recur. We knew too late. He was our balance. After that, the sea no longer spoke. For a culture that equated command with presence, Yamamoto's absence becomes metaphor. The empty bridge, the quiet radio, the decision deferred until too late. When the emperor announces surrender in August 1945, those same officers stand in rooms lit by candles because power grids no longer function. The Imperial Navy, once master of the Pacific, exists only in charts of wrecks and photographs of empty docks. At Tokyo Bay, the battleship Missouri's decks gleam beneath sunlight. Signatures fix defeat in ink. Nearby, the sea lies calm, deceptively familiar. The same ocean that had swallowed a silver-skinned bomber 2 years before. The circle closes not with explosion, but with quiet. American occupation officials later questioned captured staff about Yamamoto's death. How the route was chosen, why codes remained unchanged. Most reply with a single word or none, eyes lowered. Silence becomes confession enough. Historians will call it the moment Japan's strategic initiative ended, though the war dragged on for 2 more years. The men who lived through it know the truth differently. The empire began to end the day its most lucid strategist fell to the logic he understood best, that intelligence and industry outweigh courage once the balance tips. Now, across the Pacific, ship graveyards rust where coral grows through armor plate. Airfields he planned to inspect are reclaimed by jungle. The sound that remains is the tide, folding and unfolding along coasts once mapped for conquest. The man who awakened the giant had proven his own theorem. Dominance built on tempo cannot survive attrition. The sea he sought to command changed masters, and in its stillness the modern world took shape. An ocean ruled not by prophecy, but by the quiet arithmetic he foresaw. If you've made it this far, you're one of us. searching for the truth behind the headlines and the courage behind the silence. Subscribe to the channel, and let's keep exploring the hidden wars, secret operations, and untold fates that shape the world we live in.